call the meeting to order. We're going to table the next item, which is the review of minutes, until the next meeting. I'm going to turn it over to Scott now. We'll talk about Hosmer construction phasing. Down at that end.
We're going to walk through, sorry, I had the slides out of order. We're going to walk through at least the proposed conceptual phasing for the Hosmer construction project. And I want to emphasize that this is just a concept for the phasing that the OPM, the design team, the project team, if you will, has worked on and talked about and refined to the point that we feel comfortable presenting it essentially for the first time. I know the committee is fully aware of kind of big picture how the Hosmer project would be phased, but we're going to talk in a lot more detail tonight and walk through that. And there's a lot on these slides, so I'm going to try to make sure that I point out all of the highlights and all of the strategies that are represented within each slide, but certainly it might be best, Mr. Chairman, if after each slide we responded to questions on these because there's a lot of information in them. But I would point to the fact that right now the current timeline includes going out to bid on the Hosmer project and the Cuniff project as a package in March of 2020. And so under that assumption, and that schedule is intentionally driven in a way that makes sure the contractor would be signed up and mobilized for the summer of 2020. So this very first phase, everything you see on this slide is speaking to that summer of 2020. You can see we've labeled it June of 2020 through August of 2020. That June of 2020 to us means the last day that the school is occupied by students and staff, so it's not necessarily June 1st. And then that August of 2020 is right just before students and staff would return for school occupancy. So we're essentially talking about that summer period. During that period of time, the contractor is going to mobilize. So let's just start with the proposed area for him to mobilize and take over, if you will, on the site. So the orange dotted line represents a construction boundary that the contractor would set up. And you can see that it allows him full access to the existing Hosmer building to be demolished. So we're proposing that it follow that line. In areas like this area along Concord Road, we know we want to keep the sidewalk open, so that orange line, although just conceptual, the intent is that that sidewalk would continue to be accessible along the street. You'd still have all the parking along the street, et cetera. And then it comes along the boundary of the Z-shaped building. It wraps around, just for the summer, it wraps around this purple area that you see that is the turnaround loop on the Hancock Street side of the Hosmer. It captures the playground area, and then it comes across at approximately the midpoint of the field, because the contractor will need to set up a significant area for staging. And this summer is really about two major things. It's about the contractor setting up his boundaries, and it's about beginning the abatement and demolition of this portion of the building, which he would begin to do immediately upon arriving on the campus in the summer. The yellow area is the construction entrance and construction laydown area. We want to get the contractor onto the site as quickly as possible from Mount Auburn Street, so that there's as little disruption to the overall neighborhood as possible. And we also think that's only possible on the Boylston Street side, not on the Winthrop or the Hancock Street side. Anything that we've shown in a yellow dotted line is showing tree protection that the contractor would be responsible for putting in place. We've shown the C on this that points to demo existing building and associated pavement. The first thing the contractor would do on site, simultaneous to starting to set up his boundary, is we've got to make the disconnect between the portion of the building that's going to be demolished and the portion of the building that's going to continue to be occupied. So there'd be a significant amount of work focused in this area in that summer to make sure that that demolition of the lobby space, if you will, can take place, so that there is that clear separation. And the remaining abatement and demolition can happen on into the fall, But that break, that clean separation from the existing Z-shaped building would have to happen early on in that phase. We've also highlighted this detention system because the contractor will be occupying this area, and we may want to try to get some underground detention system in that particular area. But after that, access to that area would be returned. So with regard to that mobilization and the boundaries defined there, I would pause and say, are there any questions associated with that summer and the boundaries and what's happening?
One quick one, I assume it's an oversight, but your construction fence seems to not make its way across the field or the mound frontage.
It is. That line just doesn't show up. I think in the CAD, it probably got buried underneath that orange line, but it would come all the way around for the construction area.
Is the coming across the field that you're hoping to retain some use of that as recreation space? Was that the reason you kind of kept it that way?
The goal with this layout, and we talk about it a little bit in the next phase, but the goal with this layout, and even this orange line might get pulled into the playground just a bit, which would also be a blue line for a construction fence. We want the students who are occupying the Z-shaped building to be able to come along the sidewalk, come up through here, and come over and utilize both this hard surface area and this outdoor play area during that phase, and make those both available to the occupants of the school.
During this phasing, I think, and I could be wrong, is the elevator for the school in the part that's being demolished and the Z-shaped building will not have one? Or I'm just curious about that.
The elevator remains.
Okay.
We demolish the stairs to the side of it,
Yep.
but we leave that elevator shaft, and so from that upper floor level, the Z-shaped building would have access to the elevator and would be able to navigate the floors that it currently serves. We would close off, it's a two-sided elevator,
Right.
we would close off the side to the lobby.
Okay, great, thanks.
There's also another elevator
Oh,
on the other side of the building.
Any other questions from the committee?
This would be the primary construction phase. It's referred to as 1B, but it goes from that August 2020 to June of 2022. And we might end up pulling that June 2022 back slightly, but in general, we know that the construction of the new Hosmer building is about 24 months, so we're just showing it as the approximate 2-year duration there. During this time period, obviously the construction entrance is the same. We've talked about the fact that during some point during that phase, we want the contractor to get the new parking area that exists here in place. We say binder course, possibly reserving the final top course until the very end of construction. But we know that we want to get that parking lot in place, even though it's part of his construction area as shown here. We know that if we can, we want to get the sidewalk and the pavement in place there. But this is really about focusing on the construction of the new building during this phase and getting a bit of the plaza that exists in front of that new building in place. And it's about the 2-year duration. Again, with the contractor coming in and out of the site over in this location during that phase. We also have a detention system that will go in at some point, but that's relatively minor. The primary focus will be the construction of the new building during that phase.
Steve, the detention system, so those are that's stormwater detention, isn't it? So the soils is gonna allow that detention system?
The soils will allow for detention systems, meaning in order to, avoid surcharging too much water into the town's stormwater system, the site will include detention systems that slow the rate at which stormwater can go into the town system. So we will be including those as part of the project, even though the soils don't support full infiltration into the ground. It's possible to get a detention system in. Think of that more as, well, I'm saying this more for the viewing audience, but think of those detention systems more as large tanks that just hold the water and let it go slowly into the town's stormwater system.
I think we all know, and we've talked about this multiple times, that parking is gonna be very tricky around this time, but I do wanna point out that that B area, that Boylston lot, is huge off-street parking in the wintertime, when we got it. So I know that there's not much we can do, but I think we are gonna have some issues when it comes to snow during this time and that, and I think the town is gonna have to work around that, but I do foresee some issues.
I was gonna say the same thing, that's actually 2 winters by the looks of it, will be the winter of 21, winter 22, that won't be available for the neighborhood.
Because it's within the construction.
Sure. Those are valid points. We could certainly take a look at whether we have sufficient area to keep that out of the construction zone and try to require the contractor to do some temporary parking within the confines of the area he has remaining.
Scott, in the earlier designs, we showed modular classrooms on the front lawn for the preschool. And I know we're back into the school year in this phase, and I don't see them there.
In the past, we've shown a dotted area right here that if you definitely needed modular classrooms, that we would propose it's the only place left to locate them. But because those have never been definitively incorporated into the project, yes, they don't show in these particular diagrams.
Okay.
Questions?
This is the summer of 2022. It's a key opportunity to, the building is obviously turned over at that point in time, and the owner would have full occupancy and control. So presumably during this phase, the furniture and equipment and all the loose items that go into a building would be moved into the building, and the contractor would move his fence so that he could then take over the entire field area and immediately begin work on that area. So this is just demonstrating that in that summer, his activity is going to be confined to the area within the fence, and the town would have, and the school department would have full use and occupancy of all the other areas, including the newly completed building to begin furniture move-in.
Any questions on that section?
And then this is showing that between that summer, or let's say August, when the school is occupied, and 2024, the site would exist as you see it. The contractor has left the site, assuming he's completed all of his work on the fields, and those are under growth seasons to get them prepared for use. There would be no activity on the site during that period of time because we're leaving the Z-shaped building in place for as long as it needs to be a swing space. So this is just showing you what the site looks like when the project is complete, with the exception of the Z-shaped building still remaining in place as a swing space. And the reason 2024 is the date is because presumably if the Cuniff and the Lowell need that as swing space, it would be at least 2024 before it could be demolished. perhaps a bit longer.
Questions on this?
And the phase two with the June 2022 to August 2022, is that when, some of the playground spaces will be done for the school? It's in purple on that page.
Yes,
And then if you flip it over, and then by the time school opens, that would be available for use, and the playground would be, I presume not the field.
right. Correct. The assumption is, at this point in time, when school opens in 2022, that the playground area would be available for use, and the fields would need at least 2 growing seasons before you would start activities on those.
So does that mean all of the drainage and stormwater work happens in one summer on that field?
Yes, because it doesn't have the substantial underground stormwater management system we talked about at one time.
Oh, cool.
And in this scenario, it's possible that if it appears that field work can't be completed in time, we might have to give the contractor a bit more time in that area and just reduce his construction fence to just that area so that the entire playground was available for the schools. Does that make sense?
No, it totally makes sense. I just even with just that one playground, that's significantly less space for the kids of the school to use. That if we don't have the other playgrounds that will eventually be on that other site, like for the whole preschool that's there and kindergarten, and there's not any other outdoor space to utilize as well, so that would be a challenge in the in-between.
Couple of questions. When is occupancy then, in this scenario?
Occupancy would be in the summer of 2022.
Fall 2022 for the classes.
Right.
Sorry. And is the idea of having the field basically becomes totally, when it's, prior to that, when you're kind of about half the field's available, is that kind of, is it identified as enough for like a soccer team, or is there any particular size in there that's
There's
driving that?
There's not. It wouldn't be large enough any way we looked at it, it wouldn't be large enough for a regulation field. It's just trying to create some outdoor open space and play space.
And then the idea of to do the work where the entire field is offline, is over a summer. And then is it, I actually don't know whether that field is used more in the summer than during the school year. Recreation rents it out, or lots of different groups are using it. During the summer, the school isn't using it, but there's probably lots of other groups that use it, so,
They probably are, but unfortunately, the rentals are gonna have to stop.
yeah.
We're basically, we have to cater to the community during all of these construction periods, so I would say that our kids would come first, and we would have to eliminate any rentals that would potentially use these fields. And even after they're done, they need 2 growing seasons.
Yeah, so you would literally, for 2 growing seasons, you would keep people off of it completely?
That is correct.
Wow.
We might be able to allow some elementary school outdoor use of that, but you would certainly want to restrict any kind of competitive play on the fields.
Laurie?
Scott, piggyback on what Lindsay was saying, assuming that we don't use modules, at one point we talked about maybe taking some of the playground equipment off the Concord Road playground and moving it over to where we had originally put the modules as a kind of like temporary. Is that something we can still look into? And well, let me also say that equipment's not really good. Maybe put in some new equipment out there or temporary equipment to kind of do that. But maybe that could just be, and it wouldn't be as elaborate, something small to kind of give some of the smaller kids a little playground.
The preschool, there's gonna be a lot of preschool kids in that building.
I think that the removal, in our experience, the removal of that existing playground equipment of the style that exists in that location now, and being able to reuse it, because those would have been all concrete footings, et cetera, is very challenging. It generally proves more costly than just installing new equipment. I think to the question of new equipment, it would just be a matter of finding a location and determining how temporary you want that to be. I mean, even if it was only for, a few school years, it would have to have, an accessible surface, so you would be at least expending the money. I don't think it would be very temporary. I think it would end up being quite permanent.
Questions? Continue on, Scott, please.
This is just showing what would be the very last phase to occur on the Hosmer site, which is the demolition of the existing Z-shaped building, and then the construction of all the play areas that would exist in the former footprint of that Z-shaped building, and then going through final paving on a lot of the parking lot areas. The goal with holding off on final pavement in those areas is to make certain that when the project is complete, everything looks new. Certainly, some of that final paving could be done earlier, but the way this is set up, it does it that way such that everything appears new when that building is demolished and that final playground is developed in the area of the Z-shaped building. And we're currently estimating that would require from June until November of that year that the Z-shaped building is no longer needed.
Questions?
Steve, I'm not, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems like some of the tree protection areas are maybe missing off this one, but maybe the trees aren't, like along Boylston Street, are they gonna not remain? Just something before you look at it. And I would assume that the construction lay down an entrance in the middle of Concord Road isn't, contractor lay down area in the middle of the road, which is indicating that would be an entrance that they would use to get in there.
Correct.
Okay. Questions, Tom?
Scott, on the last phase, I noticed the blue areas, the asphalt, kind of on Concord Road closest to the Brigham House, and then in front of the Brigham House more on Boylston Street in the playground area. Why couldn't that be done much earlier, and at least finalize that parking area, in that area for, kind of during the phase 3 or phase 2?
It certainly could. We're trying to make it look new and fresh, but one alternative we've done in the past is do those earlier, just like you described, and then just seal coat them when the final project is finished and restripe them so that everything looks new. So that certainly would be an option.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you. In phase 1B, will we have access, will we be able to access the field for children?
Yes, our goal would be to locate this fence, Aaron, in a location that would allow you to leave the Z-shaped building, go up the sidewalk here, go on this side or across the hard court, and get to that field area.
And they'll be safe from construction area?
Yes, there would be a boundary fence. Generally, on a site like this, where it's such a dense residential neighborhood and we're right up against the school, we do almost all of the construction boundaries fence. We require that also include a visual barrier. So you've probably seen them before, but they insert the green slats into that fence. So it's not only a chain link barrier, but also a visual barrier.
Any questions? Any questions from the public? We can move on to the next item, which is a review of exterior materials.
few meetings ago, a couple of the building committee members just brought up the exterior materials and that at some point in time, we would be selecting more specifically what those materials are. And it's still not that time, but one of the things I wanted to do, I think it was Leo at that meeting talked a little bit about some of our imagery and some of our materials that we had distributed in the past were highly reflective, and so highly reflective and almost mirror-like in terms of their appearance. So one of the things we wanted to do is just distribute kind of an update to what those materials would be like. So I've got the Prodema, which is the wood material. I've got a sample of that I'm going to just let all of the committee members take a look at. But that, you can see from the renderings that it looks very similar to the renderings. Actually, they do a good job reflecting what that material would look like in terms of its finish and its color. And then where we have talked about the window frames, for example, the frames around all the windows here, even if it's a smaller window, and we've talked about the mullions that divide up those windows. We've talked about those being an anodized aluminum finish. So just to put that in context, I'm going to distribute just a standard sample for anodized aluminum. But if you think about that in contrast with the natural wood Prodema material, you can see they do provide a really nice complementary composition, both on the renderings and when you look at the two materials in contrast in real life, very similar. And then when we talk about the metal panel area, it's slightly different. Like, as a reminder, this area that is not wood is a metallic panel, and so the areas on the building that you see at Cuniff that are between the wood areas are a metallic panel. It's actually an aluminum panel. And then on the Hosmer, the areas that wrap the large window openings here are those same kind of aluminum panels, and the area here is an aluminum composite panel. So when you see that material on the building, we're referring to a material that looks very similar to what I'm passing around now, which is a slight contrast. It's slightly darker than the anodized aluminum window frame, and that's intentional. Where we have it, for example, wrapping around a window, we want a subtle contrast between the anodized aluminum and the metal panel around it on the Hosmer. And then even at the Cuniff, where you see the metallic panel, we want it to be still silver, but in slight contrast with the anodized aluminum of the window frame. So those are representative of those colors. And keeping in mind that we still haven't selected the final color, this is to just give you an even better sense and kind of an update of what our expectation is. But until we get an actual contractor, have a product submittal, know what manufacturer they're utilizing, we wouldn't select that final color. But I also have a glass sample that just gives you an idea. Again, you can see it in the rendering, but that gives you an idea of how those windows would contrast with the aluminum anodized frames. And same with that, we haven't picked the final color, and we would be reviewing all of these in detail with the committee prior to selecting a final color, but we just wanted to provide a bit of an update with regard to those materials.
Any questions? Lindsay?
I think at some point, I would like us, as a community, regards to the exterior materials, to talk about if the desire is that the two schools look so similar in color selection, or if we want, even if it's the same materials, but one school has a lighter wood and one is darker. You know, I think that right now, the way they look, they really do look very similar, like kind of different window layouts and different prices, but the coloring is exactly the same. And we have a third school in town that isn't matchy to that, and I just kind of wonder, like, do we want a slightly different character, even if it's just by color, between the two schools? Like right now, they are very similar, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, and I don't know how others feel about it. So.
Comments from anyone else here? Steve?
So the one side of this looks very sort of mirrorish, Is that the exterior?
That's the interior.
The interior,
Yeah.
okay. Interesting. Okay. The two on Hosmer, on the image on the left, the two large areas, I think early on you had sort of a panel there that had various geographic shapes.
In these
and
areas,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Good, so the idea now is to not have anything there, just the blue tone now?
Correct. There was some feedback from the committee, and then we also felt they might be a little distracting, so
Yeah.
the
Okay, thank
last
you.
couple of renderings have eliminated that graphic.
Paul?
Scott, when we get closer to making our decisions on the products, can we be led to links or cut sheets for these? Because this alone just screams baseball threads. You know, with the balls hitting it, I mean, so I'd like to see some way of how it's built in a panel.
Sure. That's, that particular sample is the anodized aluminum, so that would only be the window frames, and it's only to show color. The actual frame, you know, would be a solid, thicker anodized aluminum frame.
So this is in a panel
Correct,
of any type.
correct.
Because you should see those T-ballers hit that ball.
Sure.
John?
I just to Lindsay's point, I mean, I tend to agree that if there was some some kind of variation in the color or how they kind of, the dynamic of the exterior material, it would be nice rather than wouldn't want them to look kind of the same per se, and the role is so different. I don't know whether, it's hard to say from here at this stage whether you're envisioning that they would have the same kind of coloring. I didn't necessarily get that impression from earlier conversations. I thought they actually might be fairly somewhat different in terms of color toning.
With the Prodema, with the wood product, they provide a variety of different colors. So it's really easy, not really easy because there's probably only 8 different colors, but they do provide a variety of different wood species types to give us some variation. It would be significant too. All you would have to do is choose one of their other colors. It would be significant, and then you have almost unlimited possibilities in the metal panel itself. And so even though we would likely want to keep the window frames, which don't really make up that much of the composition, we'd want to keep those the same on both schools. It would be easy to make some subtle changes in the material colors that would make them look significantly different to, and I think that maybe what we'll propose is when it comes time to actually select and present to you the final materials, and when we know those manufacturers, I think I would suggest that we try some of those subtle differences and adjust the renderings to reflect those colors as part of the review and approval of the final colors.
I think that would be helpful.
When is that date? When would you need to know the final selection of the colors, since 60% DDs are being issued shortly?
We wouldn't need to know until we got into construction, because the price point between the colors is the same with the Prodema, and the same. We would select from, in the specification that we go out to bid with, we would say we want to select from any of the manufacturer's standard colors on both the wood product and on the metal panel product. So it would just be a matter of, after we get into construction and the contractor provides to us exactly who his manufacturer will be, then making that decision, so.
Any other questions? Any exteriors, any questions? Yes?
I have a couple. One is about the windows, and Scott, you said that the mirror would be on the inside, which means children looking out would see their reflection?
No, that's a film. That mirror effect is created by a film, and it's actually double pane glass, so that film gets turned to the vacuum space within the window. If you can imagine, does that make sense to everybody? It's 2 panes, and the mirrored side is always turned internally.
Yes, but will the children be able to look out
Yes, they will.
and not get their,
Yeah, it's not, ironically, when you put the two panes together, you don't get that mirror effect because that's just a film that's attempting to reflect and remove more of the solar gain. So it looks completely transparent. The next time we talk samples, we'll have an actual glass sample, which is the fully insulated sample, and that will make more sense. And you'll be able to see the level of transparency because even with that sample, it's from a manufacturer that we likely will not get on the project. And so until we know exactly who we have, we don't know what level of transparency, exactly what films they will be using, et cetera. That's just to try to give you a sense of the fact that we do want a tinted window on the exterior of the building.
Okay, and then I think it was for you, Paul?
Yes.
Okay, Paul asked about, I think it was Paul, maybe it was Steve, asked about, I'm sorry.
We don't have our name tags tonight, because we're
No,
not in our typical home.
right, but, asked about, I would call it like the durance of the material on the outside, right? That you were asking about, is this substantial, will it hold up? And so, and asked for, links or some way to explore that. So I would, really want the committee to look at that, so that we know we have the most durable material on the outside. And then, also in terms of cost review, is this kind of aluminum, as far as exterior materials go, is it more expensive than, let's say, something else that might also do the same job?
Sure. On the thin sample that we pass through, that's anodized aluminum. So that's only representing the kind of finish that would be on the aluminum window frame. So the aluminum window frames themselves are very solid, thick extruded aluminum.
Right, I'm talking about the
Sure.
panels, not
On the panels, that's going to be an aluminum composite, which is a sandwich panel, which has phenolic resin to it, an exterior metal, and then an interior metal. And that's a really super common application of an exterior metal panel material. It's probably the most common. It came to the U.S. about 50 years ago with a company called Alucobond from Europe, and now it's all over the U.S. So it's a very common use. And we're not placing it on the first floor level intentionally because we don't want anybody to be able to get to it. So all of this first floor, as we've talked about before, is going to be stone. It's a stone base at the bottom where you could get to it and touch it. So the only thing would be up high, and even the aluminum composite metal, which is a thicker material, is very common, highly durable up high, and has a really nice price point for the quality that you get. So it's super common on public schools, public buildings, commercial buildings, et cetera. But we can definitely get you a link to a lot of those manufacturers and some larger product samples on that, and as well as their data sheets.
Any other questions? Seeing none, is that it, Scott, for you for exteriors?
It is.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is establishing a pre-qualification subcommittee, and what I'm looking for this evening would be an okay to do this. I'm gonna have Vivian go through what this would be, and then my intent is to ask for a motion. I've asked Paul, Anastasia, and Laurie to serve on this committee, as well as I've asked Steve to get his assistance to have the building inspector be part of this committee as well.
That he's ready to do that.
Okay, so the committee will be Laurie, Paul, Vivian, and the building commissioner.
We would also ask Scott to join in on this.
That will, whatever, yes, of course we can do that. Vivian, if you want to explain what that is.
It'll actually be someone else from our office who's really good at this, but AI3 will be
Scott can't go to everything, right? Vivian.
Absolutely, and we just ask that AI3 be represented as well. This is to establish a pre-qualification subcommittee, and where it would be to review the qualifications of the subs, as well as the general contractor that we intend to use for these projects. It would be to put out a proposal asking for their qualifications that are interested in bidding in this project. With that, we would also do various reference checks and review their qualifications, and as a subcommittee, make a recommendation to the school building committee where it will become publicized, and upon that, these are the subs that would be formally allowed to bid for these projects. Kind of like in a nutshell. The level of involvement would be primarily during the January and February timeframe. It isn't a long duration, but crucial during those January and February, where we're already orchestrating with the procurement office to put out the pre-qualification packages, and upon receipt of those is when the involvement will really be needed.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Lindsay?
Is this a process maybe that we have to repeat when we go to bid the lower, because this is just for,
Yes.
Hennepin, Houghton?
Yes.
All right. Just sort of let me see.
Any other questions? Can I get a motion to establish this committee, please?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that the school building committee authorizes the creation of a pre-qualification subcommittee to establish and review general contractor and subcontractor qualifications to be allowed to bid the Hennepin-Hosmer projects.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the review of the project budget. I guess we're gonna turn to Vivian at this point.
Yes, and if I could ask Scott just to stay there and kind of maneuver. But in front of you, you have the projected project budget for all three projects. I'm not necessarily going to go through every single line item. However, I do want to kind of have the opportunity to discuss generals. So under the construction, as you see, the total for the subtotal for the construction of the three elementary schools is $136 million. And if you recall from our last meeting where we reviewed the cost estimates, this is the midpoint of both cost estimates, which include the escalation. We felt as though we were very comfortable carrying this amount, and it will be confirmed next month as we go through the 60% CDs. And in reviewing this with AI3, they also concurred that they felt comfortable with the $136 million. The next item are the architectural and engineering. The subtotal is $12.4 million. That includes all of the architectural addendum 1 contract values. Next section is the administrative costs. Those are pretty self-explanatory. The owner's project management is our contractual obligation. The cost estimates is part of ours. The commissioning agent, yes, we approved a commissioning agent and working to get them on board quickly. Their proposed value did come lower, if all of you recall from the fee proposals, but we recommend keeping that since there will be some alternates that we need to add in. Utility fees include some of the portions that utility back chargers from the utility company for permanent power for the new building. Legal is a placeholder if needed. Insurance, at the moment, we're assuming it to be with the GC. Moving costs. We anticipate these moving costs to cover vacating the existing schools into the Z, the swing space, and then back into their permanent homes. Included in this is also the preschool move. Other expenses, printing advertisement is just to make sure that there's some amount identified for any reimbursables, bid documents, and advertisement that is necessary. The photovoltaics, we have a certain amount allocated for 50% of the roof area. Other project costs, construction testing, this identifies more during the construction, any testing agencies for soil compaction, concrete, as well as rebar, structural steel. Other projects cost We labeled this as miscellaneous TBD because we know that there will be some unidentified, unforeseen conditions, especially since Lowell will be a renovation project. You have the subtotal, after which we have included under the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, a little over $4 million for all three schools. I do want to point out that this is a little bit higher than the standard MSBA. Granted, this is not an MSBA project, but it is a healthy budget to work towards, and we will work to manage to that budget. After which, we have always included the project contingencies of hard costs, which cover change orders, any construction-related costs, as well as owner's contingency of soft costs, which might be needed for any changes, design changes, or anywhere else that the owner might see fit. Bringing the total for the project for all three at $170 million. Any questions?
I just want to point out where in the budget here, what's required is the 50% of the roof area. We've budgeted for that. We have no budget at this point for additional photovoltaic, which the Sustainable Subcommittee is still working through on what we're going to do there. So that will be one of the potential issues that this committee will be talking about. Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I would just add to your comments and to Vivian's comments, the 700,000 placeholder, we've just got in there because we know that's a zoning requirement for photovoltaics. And then the 2.558 million is not assigned to anything that's miscellaneous. Other project costs is not assigned to anything at this point in time, as that comes out of a budget that the building committee had sort of always had at their discretion to apply however you wish. And certainly in it, that's not a contingency. It's discretionary for the building committee to determine how to allocate, because we have a super healthy contingency in that we're reserving 7.4 million under a construction contingency category and the 1.1 million that Vivian described in an owner's contingency. So a combined contingency of 8.5 million for both projects. All three projects is very healthy at this point in time.
Absolutely, especially the construction where it's slightly over a 5%. It's at 5.44 to be closer to exact on how much contingency for construction we are carrying. But the 2.5 is discretionary on how we would like to use it. And after seeing Lori's presentation, we know that that is not adequate enough for all of the photovoltaics to take the funds out of that line item, even if you include it with the 700 to cover the cost of the arrays for both projects, as well as for all the roof and the site.
John?
Yeah, just a couple of quick questions. I'll come to the photovoltaic in a moment, but the two contingencies, the construction and the owners, are those, is that based on percentages?
Those are based on percentages,
You mean a standard percentage that you use in the industry?
yes.
So, which the construction one is what, a little
It was a little over 5%.
And then the owner's one is what's that a percent of? It's off, how much is it? 1.1 million.
It comes off of the total, subtotal. It's calculated off of the project subtotal, the 161.5.
I see, okay. And then on so the photovoltaics, when you say 50% of roof area, so the 700,000, Scott, you're saying that's, I'm trying to understand where that number came from.
Where it came from is when we looked at maximizing the roof on the Hosmer and the Cuniff, and how much KW those could support if we put the maximum possible coverage on them. And then we divided that by 2. So we cut that in half and said, we'll assume 50% of the roof area is covered, but just because that's the zoning ordinance that the town adopted. And so the 700,000 essentially covers half of the proposed solar on those buildings, as you saw it laid out when we had the entire roof completely maxed out.
And so under construction, there is no photovoltaic under construction?
That is
Under construction, there is the infrastructure for the building only, which means there's empty conduits from the main electrical room closet area to the roof. And the weight of the solars has been accounted for in the roof design. But as far as any additional infrastructure, no, there is not in
No
there.
canopies or anything of that nature?
No.
One of the things I would point out, just in terms of the relationship to the original schematic design budget, though, is this is more money than we anticipated to be available for discretionary spending. Because you may recall, we talked about $4.4 million being available to spend on building improvements related to net zero and photovoltaics. And when we developed the construction documents, we knew that we were utilizing about half of that money to do more insulation, better LED lighting, all things that got us close to a really low energy use on the building. So quite frankly, we thought that when this came forward, about half of that money would be left, or somewhere around $2.2 million. And you can see when you combine the 700 with the 2.5, it's actually $3.2 million. So we were surprised at the combination of the values of the 50% photovoltaics along with the discretionary spending budget. It's more money than we thought would be available for discretionary spending.
Any other questions from the committee? Pat had a question.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. So 50% of the roof and the canopies are not budgeted for?
50% of the roof for Hosmer and Cuniff
Yes,
are a line item that we're carrying in our budget,
right.
not the canopies.
Not the canopies and no more.
And that's related to the town's current ordinance. That's a requirement.
I know, yeah. So they aren't budgeted.
Correct.
So, any other questions from the committee? At this point, I will open it up, because I know we have a couple people that want to speak. Brian, any questions?
Quick follow-up to what Ed had asked. The original design you had allocated for more solar, so you dropped that down, is that my understanding?
What do you mean by the
I
original?
mean, the proposals that I'd seen before, it seemed to be like the budget amount that I'd seen for solar had been for a larger amount, so for both dollar and for coverage of the roofs.
No, they're two separate things. When we've analyzed the solar that would fit on the site, that's an exercise in just maximizing the roof and the site and putting as much solar as we possibly could on the site just to see if it would fit, and trying to determine if we could meet the total energy use with photovoltaics on the site. Cost aside, we've got our design team on photovoltaics just working on trying to maximize. And so the drawings you've seen that laid out solar on the roof or on the site were always just trying to meet that in, trying to figure out how much we could get on the site. Now, we did attach dollars on how much that would cost from time to time, but we never really made a direct correlation between that and the total project budget. Separate from that, with regard to the total project budget, the schematic design budget included $4.4 million assigned to building improvements related to reaching net zero and photovoltaics. And so we expended a significant amount of that budget on building improvements, and that meant more insulation, better LED lighting, more efficient building systems. Like, we did everything we could to try to get the building energy use down. And so we knew we were always spending some of that 4.4 on the building, the physical building itself, and that at some point in time, the building committee would have to decide how much of the remaining money that they wanted to allocate to photovoltaics.
But it will always be designed where we can add more later if we ever want to.
Absolutely, yeah.
Charlie?
Is this the time for open
Yes.
comment? Yeah. Okay. I'm always a nervous public speaker. My name is Jocelyn Tager. I am a resident of Watertown and am the organizer of a solar group 5 that has over a megawatt of solar installed in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I have never taken a dime for my work, which enables me not to have a skin in the game and to be able to advocate for the best practices in solar installation. I have a packet, I did an analysis of a PPA compared to ownership. I will pass this out when I'm done. I have 4 bullet points that I want to read, and if I can't get through them in the time, Pat's going to take over for me, and then I will pass these and this analysis out. Okay. Owning versus leasing Watertown Schools solar arrays. In purchasing our solar system, Watertown would receive a 140% return on our investment over the system's first 20 years and an IRR, internal rate of return, of 10.2%. This return is 150% higher than what we would receive from a lease system, PPA. The return received may even be higher from an owned system, given that the PPA model used in this report is relatively generous. The model uses a PPA rate that is 20% lower than the current utility rate, but in truth, we will do well to get a discount of 15% off our current rate. Consequently, if our price of electricity is 12.5 cents a watt, we might receive only a 1.8 cent watt reduction on what we pay for electricity. The model in this report uses a 2.5 cent watt reduction off the cost we would pay for our electricity. 3, the PPA will suffer tremendously if we overproduce, since net metered kilowatt hours will be returned as credits at just 60% of our current rate, because in a PPA, the owner of the array is a private entity. A private owner receives this substantial reduction in net metering, while a public owner does not. If Watertown owns our arrays as a public entity, we will receive 100% of our retail utility rate. For municipalities, net metering is at 100%. If we overproduce, we lose nothing. We can send that extra production to anywhere we want, including other schools, municipal buildings, etc. By contrast, if a private entity owns our arrays, overproduction means that the system will lose income and that our PPA will likely be lower as a result. The problem with the PPA and third-party ownership is that the third-party investor takes the lion's share of the income, since they put up the money for the system. Even if Watertown were to forgo the shrinking federal tax benefits, we would still come out much further ahead than we would under a PPA model. The only reason not to buy the system directly would be if Watertown had no access to the necessary funding. Since we do have access, we can ensure that Watertown gets the lion's share of income. And I have this, what I just read is at the back of the packet. I have, as I've heard people's various comments, I've made 2 pages of notes, okay, on the front part of the package. I didn't know about doing a PowerPoint, so I didn't, but you can see that I have the analysis here of the 2, and we make millions over the course if we own this, and we lose that if we don't. And the other thing to know is that I did this.
Hold the microphone up.
Oh, I did this, sorry. I did this based on, I didn't have the numbers that you all had. So I just took a number, right, of watts. It's in proportion. You can multiply out the watts and then the figures, okay? And I used Belmont did a really and analyzed cost per watt. Our cost per watt would be at $1.70. It's in here, so you can look at it. Okay, and I left my information here. I'm willing to talk to anybody. I'm willing to come and answer any question. I really encourage us to use not a PPA company, but a local installer. If we're going to do a PPA that does both ownership and PPAs. And the other thing is that I have a little packet of canopies in here, but canopies, there are prefab canopies, and although I didn't mention this, canopies actually will preserve our pavement. So although I didn't talk about that benefit actually exists because one of the biggest degradations to pavement is light. Okay? Anybody? Hang on, let me pass this out.
Are there any other comments before I? Thank you for making those copies for us.
You're welcome. Had I known about your report once, I would have figured that out, but
Thank you.
I'm not a techie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I got many more.
Thank you very much.
Jolly, if you could leave the couple extras at the end of the table, please? Yeah. There are some committee members that aren't here this evening. We'll make sure they get them. Thank you. David Stokes is here this evening. He had officially submitted a document to me. I didn't want to send it to everybody until David had a chance to speak. So David, get the microphone, please. Yeah. For the audience at home.
It's just a single sheet. So. You broke it. Thank you. Okay, so you haven't received the letter yet that we wrote. Let me just start at the beginning. I'm standing here partnered with both Watertown Faces Climate Change and the Watertown Environment and Energy Efficiency Committee. When you receive the copy of our letter, more things may become apparent to you. I wrote these comments thinking that you might already have it in your hand.
I didn't want to send it
That's
out
all right.
until you had the opportunity
To speak.
tell us about it.
The sheet I just handed to you provides some consolidated evidence for the points in our letter. We started this conversation by talking about adding dishwashers to our new and renovated elementary schools so that the town could stop throwing away cafeteria trays, especially polystyrene foam ones. That led to talking about using all washable food serviceware, including trays, plates, cups, and utensils. Then, along with other conversations that are going on around town, we expanded to recycling. Expanded recycling efforts. Apologies, to include composting, especially since some schools were already using compostable trays, but we're going into the trash. When digging into the details to reduce total solid waste, one finds that we should also facilitate the removal of liquids from the cafeteria trash. All of these endeavors, which approach something called zero waste, as one person called it, will reduce Watertown's contribution to the climate crisis and the planetary plastic pollution problem. It will also teach our students how to be better stewards of this planet, making a difference with their own actions and choices.
The bottom line is this: doing all of this is cheaper in the long run. It is not necessarily easy, and it does require space to be set aside for different receptacles and new appliances in the schools, more adults to help, and modified operating procedures. But if we are actually reducing the amount of trash that is sent to the incinerator and reusing and recycling everything that can be, the town will have smaller costs over time. Other towns are ahead of Watertown on this curve. We should learn from their experiences and make great strides forward for the sake of our children and the generations to come. I believe the school department is already working to move our schools up that curve. We heard about that at the Sustainability Subcommittee tonight. You are all responsible for the design and construction of the 3 elementary schools and not for their daily operation. Therefore, I submit that the town should start looking at the zero waste path, with this committee setting aside space and utility hookups necessary for appropriate waste separation and for washing of reusable food service ware. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public that has any questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Sustainability Committee update. John?
So the Sustainability Subcommittee met just prior to this meeting, and we had discussions actually about both of the topics that were just presented to us. We started with the options, looking at the reusable versus compostable cafeteria trays, and Dee, the superintendent, and Brandon Rabbit, the director of food services, did a presentation about that, and put forward a proposal to use compostable cafeteria trays, and kind of integrating that in with the curriculum. We had a full schedule, so we weren't able to spend a lot of time talking about that. Then we moved on to the presentation by Lori Cable on the photovoltaics and the power purchasing agreement. And she presented information just to kind of lay the groundwork of what some of the basics are around the power purchasing agreement. And again, we had very limited time to discuss. So what we're going to do is meet again next week as a subcommittee at 4 o'clock on Tuesday, Monday? Tuesday. 4 o'clock on Tuesday the 26th. Our goal is to come back to the building committee with a recommendation on December 4th. That's our goal. We'll hope to be able to achieve that. So we need more time to discuss it. We need more time to hear from the public about it as well. And so we will try to do that next week, and then report back on December 4th to the building committee.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Yes, Charlie?
No, I was waiting for you to be public, and just shoot up my hand. It seems to me that the 4th is, it seems to me, John, that the 4th is early for a decision. It's a big issue, and it's complicated, and for people to really understand it, if we're meeting next Tuesday and it's right before Thanksgiving, and then you're going to be reporting the week after Thanksgiving, it seems to me that doesn't give people time. And I think this is a kind of issue that does deserve time.
It definitely will take time. I mean, I think we will talk about it on next week, and if we feel we need more time to look at it, we'll do that. But I think there is there's an issue here of wanting to move along as expeditiously as we can. But recognize too that as a subcommittee, we'll make a recommendation to the full building committee, and then the building committee is likely to take some time also. I'm sure they're not gonna just take what we say and put a stamp on it. And so the building, they aren't. I doubt it. And so I suspect the building committee, I don't expect them to make a decision on the 4th. I doubt it. It's possible, but unlikely. And they will then look at it again at the subsequent meeting in December. So it's not like we're making a final decision even next week. I mean, there's going to be levels here of review.
Okay, because we're right over Thanksgiving, and there'll be a lot of people gone. I understand. I'm just saying there are a lot of people gone next Tuesday. And so to be having that committee meeting then, when there'll be already people gone for Thanksgiving, and then the week after, it's coming to the school building committee, I think that's too soon.
Thank you. Anyone else? Laurie?
I just want to clarify too, that, like John was right, we will not be making any decisions. I mean, even when we look at it, it's gonna have to go to the town council before we make any decisions. So we're not looking at a final decision until well into the next calendar year. However, what we're looking at is to push it forward. If it's a viable thing to look at, then we'll be pushing it forward. So final decisions, it will take some time, but we do want to keep moving it through the committees and into the town council if we feel that it's a viable option.
Wouldn't both be viable? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wondered if by viable option you mean the PPA.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. Charlie?
Okay, it seems to me that the viable option should be both. And that, because it is such a complicated issue, and that the entire committee needs to look at it, because a PPA takes us into debt. And the only folks I know who can do that are our elected officials. So it's a complicated issue.
I think we're talking the same thing.
We
I think
are.
we're
We
talking
are.
the same thing.
This is not gonna be decided by this committee on December 4th. This is-
Right, but, you know,
And it's gonna end up at the town council. The town council will hold a public, very public meeting and discussion about it, because it's the council's decision to enter into, to ask the manager to enter into this type of an agreement. Thank you. Next item is the review and approval of invoices. Tom?
Thank you. Early this afternoon, I sent out 2 attachments, one for the 3 elementary school project and one for the high school project. I'm looking tonight for approval regarding the 3 elementary school projects for the month of October for AI3 architects for basic services, extra services, and their reimbursable expenses totaling $1,541,784.75. And regarding the high school project, I also sent that out, and the invoices for Compass Project Management for the months of September and October total $14,280, and AI3 Architects also for the period ending October 31st is another $27,453.84.
Can I get a motion to pay the invoices?
So the Compass, we're paying Compass, what do we say, $14,280?
$14,280.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the invoices for Compass Project Management, $14,280.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
And then the, sorry. You
Tom.
sent the emails after,
Tom. Give me one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have a set.
okay, after I'd already left the office, so
Sorry.
I didn't get a chance to look
They
at it.
come, we have some paper copies.
It's a set for Vinnie, for the notes. The reason why I'm, just so you know, one of the reasons why I'm asking for the votes be different for the high school versus the 3 elementary school is because the minutes have to reflect, for the MSBA reimbursement, it has to reflect them differently.
So there's no, so the, 1,541,784.75 is just for the elementary school.
That's just for the elementary school.
So we don't have AI3.
Yes, we have, for the AI3, we have 27,453.84 is the other package.
In the other package. All right, so, so,
That was for the high school.
that was
Do
for
the
the
AI3 for the high school.
AI3 for high school is
That one. Right there.
total, sorry, Tom, you have to,
It's right on,
AI3 for the high school is what,
the front page of each package is a summary of all the invoices.
packages, there only one was there multiple packages? Oh, that,
No, it's stapled together, it's the second page.
I gave you 2 stapled
so
packages.
the 9,606,000.
No, I gave you,
No,
two-
it's not,
I gave you two stapled packages.
okay,
Oh, I thought they were separate. Sorry, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, one is for the hhigh school and one's for
Sorry,
the three
that's-
elementary
okay.
school.
That's why,
We already did Compass.
we're decoupling. And then AI three, okay. So AI three for the high school.
It's
um,
$27,453.84.
So $27,454. Make a motion that we approve that.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
And then,
Elementary schools.
And then for the three elementary school project, for AI three, it's, I make a motion that we approve invoices totaling $1,541,784.75.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, sorry, we,
No, and just so the committee knows, is that I've met with both OPMs about making this process a little bit smoother, so that the minutes are gonna be actually, the invoices will be coming directly from the OPM to the full committee well in advance, and I actually asked them to do it at least 48 hours before we meet.
Yeah, it just, I was driving in my car when you emailed us, so.
So with that, since for the 3 elementary school project, I'm here. We did meet with Tom and discuss the various, not only the budget as well as the process, and we'll contact AI3 to make sure that the invoices come to us. We'll prepare a cover sheet, spreadsheet, and forward it on to Tom, and which will also be distributed to this committee in advance.
after Tom's review.
Yes.
Okay. Vivian, do you have anything else on the elementary schools right now?
No, thank you.
Okay. High school update? Dee Dee, you want to take this one?
Sure, of course. Thank you. So we are very excited at this moment to be embarking on the visioning process for the new high school. And we've talked about this before in this committee, but currently we are in the middle of the actual visioning sessions at the high school. So those are 3 sessions. We began on November the 14th. We have our second one on December the 2nd, and then the final one is on December the 16th. That team is comprised of approximately 50 to 55 people. We've got students, we have teachers, parents, administrators, community members, and elected officials all serving on that committee. It's not a committee, it's a working group. And really the point of that is to dig deep into what it is that we would like to see educationally for our new high school. And not just in terms of the academic program within the day, but then also thinking about the building as a community building as well. So I'm spending a lot of time in that process. The first day was really just trying to get us to think a little bit more broadly about what a new high school could offer. And then the next 2 sessions are very practical. We'll get into actually creating and designing and thinking about what the space will look like. So that's very exciting. And all of that information is being captured and will help to shape the educational program that has to be submitted to the MSBA. Above and beyond that, we had our first community forum last night. It was very well attended, I think. Certainly we would love to have more people come to the forums, but I felt for our first night out, it was great. It was held here in the lecture hall. And I think that Mr. Sedaris alluded to the fact that we might end up with some of the community forums out in other school buildings as well, just to make sure that we're able to attract some of the parents who will have students coming into the high school. So that was great to go over the process and then to have a pretty good lengthy conversation back and forth about questions and answers around where we're going, how we're doing this, and what the plan is for the future high school. So I thought it was a great event. That's actually going to be on WCA TV, I think, starting today, tomorrow, somewhere in the future. Tomorrow. Excellent. So if anybody wants to catch that, they can as well. I just want to mention one other thing about the high school project. At the Monday night school committee meeting, I, along with our career and technical education coordinator, spoke a little bit about Chapter 74 programming for the new high school. So those would be very intense technical programs, and we're looking at the possibility of incorporating engineering technology as well as medical assisting within our new building. We know we can't have extensive programs, but certainly we'd like to be able to offer a few of the more in-depth really career-oriented programs for the new high school. So that's something that the school committee is considering since it is part of the program. So that's an update for the high school.
Any questions, any comments? I will, just to follow up on last evening, there were I got several comments today about how well they thought the meeting went and how much information that was provided. So I encourage people to get on WCAS-TV and WCATV and watch this. I got too many
Too many letters.
letters, so it's very interesting. Our next meeting is on December 4th. We're gonna be back in the council chamber. Are there any other comments before we adjourn?
I have a question.
Yes.
Are we planning on, and then the next meeting after that, are we still planning on meeting on December 17th? Is
Yes.
that the plan? Okay. I see December's busy for folks, just want to make sure we outline the next couple.
Yes, as you can see by this evening, I did get contacted by several people. We know that everybody can't get to every meeting. You know, you do your best and we need to keep the projects moving. And so I appreciate everybody's efforts to get here when they can. Can I get a motion to adjourn, and go into executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'm gonna ask John if you could do a roll call, please.
Tom,
Yes.
Edie,
Yes.
Lindsay,
Yes.
Vinnie,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Lori. Paul. Did it? Oh, Paul, Steve. And myself, yes, Mark.
Yes. We will not be returning to open session. Thank you.